So welcome everybody. My name is Dr. John Marshall. I am the Chief of Hematology Oncology at Georgetown and the Clinical Director of the Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center here at Georgetown University MedStar Hospital. And welcome to the fifth in our series that we have been hosting on Facebook Chat about the various impacts of COVID on our cancer community in specific. And by that community, I don't just mean here at our hospital, but really our community all around the city and around the world. And these series have been quite popular and quite challenging, but none, I think, is as challenging as the one we are about to face. And I'm joined by both a good friend and a colleague who have taken some time today to spend with us to talk about really the challenging subject of our spirituality and faith as our patients and their caregivers within our cancer world. And frankly, all of us, and we as providers alike, are facing not only the challenges of medical illness, but now this changing world that we don't really have a good sense of where it's going. So let me stop and introduce our two panelists, co-panelists. The first is a very good friend and actually my pastor. I'm a longtime member of Georgetown Presbyterian Church, just on the other side of Wisconsin Avenue. And Reverend Dr. Camille Cook is our pastor there and a great influence on me and my own spirituality and my family's as well. And she is nice enough to join us for this discussion. Camille, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great to have you. Thank you from the other side of Wisconsin. And I think probably down the hill somewhere is Imam Yahya Hendi, who is really internationally famous for his presence on this Jesuit campus as a full-time faculty member and influencer. Georgetown is one of its beauties is its ability to embrace and understand religion in the context of children and young adults growing and being educated. And he is, as I said, an international reputation for his influence in this field. So Imam Hendi, thank you so much for joining us.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you, and thank you for having me, my friend.
My pleasure. So I wanted to sort of let you guys start by shaping just the operations that you've been having to go through in order for folks to maintain their traditions and their spirituality. Here at the hospital, as you know, we've gone to televisits, our topic from last time. We've had to change our operations dramatically and suddenly in order to maintain the care that we are providing. You guys deliver a unique care to many people in the world. So Camille, maybe start with you and talk a little bit about what Georgetown Pres has done to handle all the changes that are going down.
Yeah, it's impacted every part of our ministry. It's impacted the way that we provide pastoral care and counseling to people and making those things still accessible but remote. It's changed the way that we worship. Now we're sort of producing like a TV show on Sunday mornings as opposed to gathering as a community. And we've had to really modify how we do outreach to kind of vulnerable communities in the neighborhood and in the city. And every single area has had to have like very fast changes and creativity to make them still relevant and operational. So it's been a time of creativity and sort of intense work to make that all happen. But it's been really meaningful work as well, because I think it's important time for the church to be open.
So maybe reflect a bit about what you think might have been lost in the transition and maybe what you gained. Because I was reflecting that with video visits, for example, I can now make a house call when before it really wasn't part of my deal. But so from a regional church that our congregation comes from all over the DC area, how's that positively and negatively impacted things for us?
Well, the positive pieces, I think people are asking questions. People are, this sort of a rupture and a disruption. So they're asking questions. They're seeing places where there is loss and recognizing the value that's there. I think one change is people are not able to, because we're not able to gather together, you don't get that face-to-face contact and connection and sympathy and understanding, and the experience of really being known in this time, where usually when you're going through hard times, you go to those places and those people and you look them in the eye and you give them a hug, and those things have been taken away, which has been really hard for people. But I think the ways that we've been able to stay connected have been beautiful exchanges of community and connection and sharing on levels that might be deeper than we would normally do just kind of casually over coffee on a Sunday morning.
I have to say, I was thinking about this, that, one of the brilliant things you guys have done is you actually have video people from their own homes, and never could you have gotten some of those parishioners or members of the congregation to go up and do a prayer or something like that from the heart. But when it's like this, it comes all out. And so we do hear each other's feelings in an intimate way that we didn't really feel before. So it's been a great part of that. Imam, Hendy, give us a sense. I mean, I know the campus is really quiet, but you serve not only the campus, but regionally as well. So maybe talk a little bit about the dramatic impact this has had on your practice, as well as particularly during Ramadan.
Well, thank you, my friend, and Ramadan Kareem to those who are watching and listening to us now. Well, as you know, I mean, we went into spring break the first week of March, thinking that 10 days later we're coming back normal. And as we left, a few days later, we were told, sorry, no coming back. And it hit home in ways that we have not imagined. Imams, rabbis, Christian clergy, we work by being present. We minister what we call ministry of the presence. We engage people, we visit with people, we go out with people, we talk to people face to face. So it was really a big shift overnight, where we only communicate through Zoom or internet or going online. And this affected the way we do business without any doubt. These are what I call times of testing our faith, our commitment to family, our commitment to God, our commitment to one another. So it has been very challenging in so many ways, shapes, and forms. Students who are worried about internship in the summer, and are they going to have it or not, or worried about graduating, or worried about jobs offers, or even worried about, are we going to come back in the fall or not? Yeah. A big question for our students, for our community, for the parents. Are our students going, to Georgetown or not again? Or in new admissions, people overseas, Georgetown University admits so many students from so many countries around the world, many of whom cannot anymore travel to Washington, D.C., to America, cannot get visas. Even if they have visas, there are no airlines that are operating, which is affecting our financing, our way of thinking about economics. And at Georgetown, we have a hire freeze. We cannot hire anymore, at least in the very near future. So it has affected the way we do business in so many ways, shapes, and forms. But at the same time, it forced us to be creative about being responsive to our community here at Georgetown University. And I think we did a good job.
Yeah, I do too. I think the place did a good job. Let's talk a little bit about these young people, because, they're in our church, and I know they're here at Georgetown. And, it feels to me that they're particularly vulnerable right now, not necessarily because they're going to get infection. They may be the best group for that. But that they're lost in a world where we don't really see a future. Either of you all have thoughts on what you're hearing, what you're seeing in this sort of late teen 20s space, and how they're reacting to this spiritually, specifically?
It's such a pause and a disruption to the trajectory you're on when you're young and you're getting educated and you're looking for jobs and you're looking for relationships, and to have the pause button really hit on that, and then taking away the certainty of things that you just expected to be there for you, I think is causing people to really wrestle. And it's this time where that can be a positive thing. It's never waste a crisis, right? So how can we turn that into something where we turn to foundations of faith, and we turn to places where we're seeking truth, and we're seeking lasting support. And I think those things could be good in the longer term. They're just really hard to go through. And so I think that can, for young people, for anyone, that can cause spirals of the heart, the mind, and I do think that demographic is kind of at risk, not for the physical impacts, but the longer impacts for how do they get going and how do they face the future.
You know, one of the questions I'm getting a lot about routine, and our young men and women at Georgetown University or in many colleges are used to routine. They wake up at 8 o'clock, they go to class, then they do paper, they do essays, then they have exams at a specific time. They have to apply for this and that. And now that routine is erupted. So the ability to deal with that routine has been tough, bring about anxiety. This is why in some of my videos I produced on YouTube, we're talking about self-care, asking our students not to worry about how do we get rid of anxiety, but rather how do we manage our anxiety? Because the question we get, how can I get rid of that anxiety, of that depression? And I say, I don't think you even can get rid of it or need to get rid of it. The question should be, how do we manage our anxiety in a positive way, in a way that will keep me going with the right spirit and with the right energy?
Yeah, I think that's great comment. Let's spend a few minutes talking about the specific sort of hospital health issues that our listeners are more focused on. And the kinds of things that, okay, you already have cancer or a member of your family does, and now this is going on with all of its restrictions. And I just wonder if you're getting some of that through your faith discussions with those you're in contact with, and how it's affecting folks. I think all of us like to know that we're not alone in our feelings and our emotions. And I think obviously we can't be specific about this, but sort of sharing the kinds of things that are coming into you right now that might be interesting to our listeners, I think might help. Camille, thoughts on that?
Well, the range is so vast for the issues that this is raising for people and the ways that this is pushing particular buttons, from job issues to relationship issues to children and schooling and finances, and health is certainly a component of that. I think there's not one question, but the theme that's interesting is that there is a collective anxiety and a collective loss that we don't usually experience. It's usually isolated, like I have this problem right now and I have to solve this. Whereas right now we're all being sort of held in this liminal space of I can't fix this. And when you can't fix it and you can't just troubleshoot the problem like we usually do, you have to turn to deeper things. You have to look for meaning and purpose and truth and hopefully foundations of faith. And if you don't have foundations of faith, trying to cultivate them and trying to turn towards truth and turn towards divine presence and divine support. If that's like an outcome of this, if we look forward and say people were really pressed, and when they were pressed, they turned towards faith, I will feel very happy about that. But I think it's, in crisis times that we need to rely on our faith. And when you take away the normal ways we practice faith and say, you can't just go here and worship, you can't just go and meet with your pastor, you can't just go to your Bible study, that's when it becomes harder. It's like compounding stress. And I think if you're a cancer patient or you're supporting someone who's sick and you have compounded stress, you really need those deep foundations of faith and support. Otherwise, this is such an isolating, difficult time.
Yeah, it is lonely.
For me, I have been reflecting for almost a month on this, and I would answer you with 3 words: depth, belonging, and depth and belonging. And so how do I find meaning in what is happening in a way that makes sense to me as an individual, as a patient, and as a family member of a cancer patient? But at the same time, how do I find a way to belong to my community? And how does that belonging happen for the patient? How do I find the way to get out, to reach out, to connect with all of these programs that we're offering? At the same time, we, the community leaders, the church leaders, the mosque leaders, the synagogue leaders, how do we provide the programs to tell our patients that we're here for you and we are listening to you, we care for you, and we will always care for you. So depth, belonging, and meaning. Why is this happening? Is God angry with us, or is this a normal thing that we have to expect in life? That life is never the same steady speed. It goes up and it goes down. And how do we deal with it when it goes up or it goes down? So these are three words: depth, meaning, and belonging.
No, I think that's so important, as you all were describing that, and the importance, like for me and our church, is being with these with my fellow congregants and hearing the words together. We all hate waiting in waiting rooms for doctors, but on some level, you're joining a community. And so you overhear, or you see other behaviors and you learn. And of course, we're even losing that now with all of the distancing and the like. And there's a biological phenomenon from this side of campus where cells like to be next to each other. If you put a cell over by itself, it's sort of unhappy, and cells like to touch the neighboring cell so they know somebody's right there. And I think that's true for us in many ways. And so having lost that cell-to-cell contact has made us clearly unsettled and question all of the things you're talking about. So Camille, I'll throw you a mean one. So is God mad at us? What's going on here?
Yeah, that's not my theology, that's how God works, to kind of punish us for our sins. Even though we might deserve that, I think that's not how God works in the world. And I think my belief is that God is present with us through this time and through this valley, and will help us, give us daily bread to get through it. But this is not a sign or reflection of God's anger or wrath towards us.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame God for this. I blame the hands of the human being. This virus, whether it was man-made or naturally created or made, it's not what God wants to use against us. God is not angry with us. Actually, in the Quran, every chapter in the Quran, we have 114 chapters, start with the word Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. We worship a God of mercy, a God of compassion, a God of love, a God who cares and embraces us. What we need to do is to use this opportunity to see, have we been away from God? And have we been away from one another? Yes, coronavirus is terrible. It's killing people. It's very painful reality. It's very testing time. But at the same time, coronavirus reminded us that we are all in this together. What happens in one village in China affects every town in America. What happens in America affects people in Europe and in the Middle East and in Africa. We're all in this together. If we can come out with this coronavirus crisis, believing that we are all in this together, we are united more than divided. We worship one God, but we can worship God in different ways. For me, that would be enough. Or to find a sense of community, my friend. How, as a counselor who counsels mothers and fathers and children, we don't get together. Coronavirus is forcing us to actually have daily meals together and holding hands and praying together. Or, I have heard from my Jewish brothers and sisters for Passover. This is the first time to have more people joining the Passover meal than ever before. I'm hearing that about Ramadan too. More people are coming in. I have my sisters and brothers joining in from overseas. Man, this is amazing.
Yeah, we did the Marshall family Zoom on Friday night, and we had like cousins who never would have sat still for an hour, all sitting there, just talking and listening to each other. And it was really special. And there's no wall high enough that you can build that will keep this virus from affecting things. So I'm all about tearing down walls. And so I pray that both of you, your messages go forward, and that we do remember this when times do get a little better, and enjoy it. I think about, I'm the crazy old man now walking in the neighborhood, and I wave at everybody now and say hello from 6 or more feet away. But when before I would have just walked on without saying hello. And I hope I continue to do that for the time going forward. I want to take us back into the hospital, into what we see, and this is both to us as providers and our patients and caregivers, as maybe the hardest part of this whole thing, and that is you can't have visitors. And so that's true if you're an outpatient and you're coming to get your chemotherapy, or you're admitted to the hospital and you're sick. And in fact, we are not going into rooms nearly as often because we're treating everybody as maybe you're infected. So our patients are alone at a time when they need advocacy. They need that person sitting next to them. And I wonder what the role of the church, and we're big into pastors and counselors here at Georgetown, but what you see as our advice to all of us is how we can help our fellow human beings be less lonely at a time when they need us. Thoughts? Nobody?
I would say, a daily message. Via internet, you can broadcast a message maybe every 2 hours, 3 hours in the hospital, a message of positivity, a message of hope, a message of togetherness, I think will help. I'm sending messages out to my community members who are in that situation, songs, music. And in the Muslim community, we talk about recitation of the Quran, the tilawah. And I find small segments like 3 to 5 minutes recitations of the Quran that bring comfort to the soul and serenity to the heart. And I'm sending them out. And I found those messages to be, however small and little, they don't take much time from me. I find them to be really, really, really helpful.
Yeah. Across town, our sister hospital across town, every time a COVID positive patient is discharged, they play a song throughout the hospital. Everybody listens. It's like in the old days when they would play a happy birthday when a baby was born. Now we're playing a song for every discharge. Camille, on an individual basis, what are some of the things you've been called to do, and give us advice on our side of how to change someone's day to make them a little less lonely?
Yeah, I just think that is a huge loss, to be in those times of real fear and trial and not to have the people that are closest to you able to support you in the usual ways. I don't underestimate how big of a stress that is, and that's certainly impacted parishioners here who have loved ones who are sick, that they can't be with them, loved ones who are going through chemo, they can't get it, they can't travel to be with people. And I think that for me, this is a really important time to remember that even when the people that we love can't be with us, God is with us. We are not alone. We might feel very alone, but our faith reminds us, like the 23rd Psalm, like read it. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. God is with us. And I think that we need to be encouraged by that the people we want next to us might not be able to be there right now, but we still are not alone.
Yeah.
There's a tradition in Islam that God is faster to us than the speed of our blood in our veins.
Mm-hmm.
That God walks to us and runs with us and talks to us. And I have been telling my community members about the need in this time, especially to know and remember that God is with us, listening, watching, walking, and doing everything with us. So yes, your brother is not there, your sister, your mother, your parent, your spouse is not there, but God, the King of all kings, the all powerful, the all loving, the all caring, is really embracing you with God's beautiful heart. And imagine what God's heart is, the biggest heart you can ever want to have.
Very nice. We do have a few questions, but I also want to encourage our audience. You can enter questions into the Facebook feed, and they are getting them to us if you want. But one of the questions that came in early was based on a discussion we were having earlier. So what do you tell people who really begin to doubt God's existence and what faith they did have is being challenged by this? And the asker writes, is it sort of normal to feel forgotten in this space? Anybody want to take that?
You know, my tradition is such that doubts are welcome, that those wrestlings are a normal part of the process of deepening faith and discovering faith. And so I think paying attention to where those doubts are coming from and you know the roots of those is really important. Ask the questions, wrestle with it, and trust that God is at work in that process and that you can find deeper faith if you're willing to do that hard work of really, you know, having it out with God and looking for scriptures and finding resources. I think that is welcome, and that is a really important part of being faithful.
Yeah. I wouldn't tell anyone not to ask. You are right. You know, in the Quran, the word ask and reflect and think is repeated 457 times. The first verse in the Holy Quran talks about Iqra, which means read, reflect, and think. And therefore, the idea here is it's okay to ask, it's okay to question, it's okay to say, God, okay, if you exist, where are you? And I believe, as my sister said, God does answer the question, and sometimes your faith is empowered with those kinds of questions.
Yeah. Related to that further, let me dig a little deeper, is that, you know, how do we, or what's some advice you've given to strengthen our faith during these times? You know, we can't go to church, we can't hear the organ play aloud, we can't do our prayers together. You know, we can still fast as you are doing in Ramadan. There are certain things you can do, but there are certain things we cannot. So what are some of the bridges to make sure we are keeping our faith strong?
You know, I think in Washington, we love to find experts. And so if you have faith questions, like you want to find the expert, if you have...
That's why you're on the phone here.
I know, but I think you're taking away some of the ability to connect with the experts and just outsource this. So instead of just getting answers, you're having to look for them. Instead of having someone guide you through the practices, you're having to do them yourself. And I think those are good things, that we are having to become experts. We're having to teach our children. We're having to not outsource it in the ways that we are used to doing. And so making it individual, even though the communal parts are so important and they will return, it is not a bad thing to spend some time, you know, with yourself and with God and with your practices and finding new practices. I think that those can be really good things and forces that have happened.
You know, I love stories. We all do. And our traditions are filled with the stories. That's what I'm telling my community. Go to the story of the Quran, whether it's the story of Moses and the difficulties he had been through. And at one point, as he is about to cross the sea, he says, Inna ma'i rabbi sayahdin, God is with me. And he does not say God, he says, my Lord. Imagine that belonging. My Lord is with me, and my Lord shall guide me through this. What an amazing power. Jesus and the pain Jesus goes through, according to the Quran, chapter 4, talks about the pain he felt from his community and the pressures on him. But again, Jesus himself reaches out to God and says, God, don't forsake me. And God says, I have not. He says, I know you have not. I'm just telling you with certainty, you know. So that amazing faith in Jesus, and imagine what those who went after Jesus had in mind. They wanted to kill him and end him for good. But how many people are following Jesus now? So the message of hope never dies. The story of Muhammad, when he was forced out of his city, the city of Mecca, ended up in the city of Medina, a refugee. But look at the faith of Muhammad. Billions of people around the world follow him. So the story of Jonah, and there's so many stories. The story of you of little faith, you know, in the Bible comes to mind often. That read these stories, you will find solutions in them.
So I'll make a pitch to G-Town Press, because if I heard right on last Sunday's service, that the month of May we're dedicating to the stories. We're going to be telling the stories, and we do have a wonderful service on at 11 o'clock that I welcome and ping out to people around. That it's not a TV show. It's well, it is a TV show, but it's really amazingly important for me on a weekly basis, and to be connected to my God and my spirituality and the people around me, and to know we're all sitting there and saying, who else has clicked in, and who, we're looking to see who's joined us, and we restore community even though it is electronic, and it's very, very important to me personally.
But John, we go from the biblical story to the Quranic story to the personal story.
Right.
The other day, I spent literally with my family, everyone, till 5 a.m. talking about our own personal stories, that we all have been through painful narratives and stories to tell. But guess what? We're here, we are eating, we're enjoying everything. We will go through this.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. You all are reassuring me that it was an oversight when I think you were not listed as essential workers on the District of Columbia's list. But you are for me and so many that are listening in, and so many in our community. So I very much personally, and on behalf of everyone else, appreciate your being open for business. And while it's not business as usual, it is still the celebration of our oneness, our togetherness, and our spirituality, and the importance of that. So we're at the bottom of our hour. I knew it would go very fast, and we have answered the questions that have come in. So on behalf of the whole Cancer Center and our whole community here, thank you both so much for joining. And I know this will mean a lot to so many people. You all have a good rest of your week.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, John. Take care. God bless.